So here you see another example which is focused on the incoming goods, an example we quickly discussed before. Incoming goods, that means that you somehow care about your purchase order. You ordered some material which is required for your production process, and then of course you have to monitor that. Of course you have to check the quality and so on. Um, I don't want to discuss all steps in detail. I just would like to focus on some special constructs or special constellations here in this process, which might be different than what we learned from the general overview, the general introduction of the EPC method. So the first interesting point could be that you start with an event, then you have some activities, you have some functions to perform, and in this case you just make the purchase order, you transfer it to your supplier, and then if your supplier received it, you have to monitor your purchase order. You're interested in actually getting the material for the purchase order early enough such that you can produce your products, and in this case uh, you would intensively monitor your purchase order. You would intensively maybe also talk to your supplier if he's able to deliver the material at the right point in time. And then you see that after this monitoring here, after this function, an OR split might be done. So it could happen that the date of the delivery is at risk. You make a phone call, you make maybe several phone calls to your supplier, and you somehow detect, okay, there is some risk that the purchase order is not received on time. And then you might decide as a first mean to avoid a late delivery, that you send a reminder for the delivery to the supplier. And if you see in this function, if you see during your monitoring that there's no risk, then actually you just go this way. You just see that the delivery date is not at risk, and then you just continue because the material is finally received at some point in time. The material is received, and you can continue with the received materials. And if you received these materials, then you see that there is a end split after this receiving, and the one branch continues with the function in the incoming goods department. It's about the inspection of the quality, and the other one is about activities in the accounting department. So here you see some, maybe on the first view, not very easy constructs. You split with an and you join with an OR, and you come to this function. Here it's straight through from the AND split to the function. And then you continue again with some functions, with some events. Maybe here in this case, an event, a function, and an event. And you might see that at some point you have to correct something, and you can also go back in your process to feed in some data at a different point. So here you arrive at this OR with the corrected data, and you transfer it to the function so that you can record the change of the incoming goods into your accounting. Then the accounting is done, and so on. And what is also interesting here is that you might have an event which just happens, for example, the invoice which is received, and at the same level there's the accounting done, so you just do the paperwork, and then you're done for the moment. And if the invoice is received as well, then you can join both together. The accounting is done and the invoice is received. You join them and you say, okay, you inspect the invoice. You inspect if the invoice is okay, or if the invoice is not okay, then you continue appropriately. Now, maybe a correction is done. Maybe you also decide for, again, communicating to the supplier. Then you would draw here another connection to somewhere else. But anyway, it doesn't matter here. In this simple example, you just correct the invoice data and you finally register the invoice and the accounting is done. So here you see you finish with an event, invoice accounting is done. In parallel, the goods are distributed to the warehouse maybe, and your process is finished, your process of the incoming goods. And here you see that it's not only straight through what you do with your EPC modeling. It's like in real life. You might have to turn back to a process step before, and then you can also model that with your EPC by connecting to an event which was actually before in the chain, and you can work with that other event to maybe update something or to redo something which is important for you in your process. Like in the real world, where it's not always straight through in one direction, no parallel and no repetition. Here you can model it with the EPC diagram like it's done in the real world.